purification and cure of their hearts from the passions. They also need to know how they can become free from guilt and how they can overcome the problem of death or the fear associated with death. This is very important because if we probe into these things carefully, we will realize that drugs, AIDS, rebellions, and many other problems that society faces and deals with today are related to this inner uncertainty and anxiety. These evils of society are related to the guilt that the children feel about the dilemma of death and the absence of purpose in their life. We must also stress that all the Christians today, even those who are baptized while young, should be shepherded under these guidelines. I believe very strongly that we need to see catechism under these perspectives so we can help the contemporary men effectively, who seeks and searches for the truth and the life. Man today is exhausted from many external activities and artificial pleasures, and he searches for fulfillment in his life. Now, if a man comes to modern-day orthodoxy, and he comes across a papist or Protestant way of view, a mixture or a watered-down orthodoxy, or if he finds a mentality similar to the Eastern religions, then his disappointment will be immense. Orthodoxy today must give essential and concrete answers to the existential problems that plague today's men. We must face all these problems under the perspective of Orthodox theology as designated by the Church Fathers. The Orthodox Church has a totally different content as compared to the content offered by other persuasions and religions. For example, our church has a totally different idea and a different meaning about therapy and cure of the human soul compared to the idea of cure as seen by other faiths. In other words, Protestant denominations may talk about cure and healing. The Oriental men, the Buddhists, may talk about cure, but the meaning is different. The psychologists can talk about cure, but under a totally different perspective. This is why the Orthodox Church does not exhaust itself to a moral or external or superficial level, but it enters the ontological level when dealing with the subject of therapy. Now, if we, the Orthodox clergy, do not have a clear idea what therapy or what sickness is, what sickness of the soul is all about, then we create confusion. We go on confusing the laity. We confuse the people of God. This is an important issue, and we will touch more on this on the second part of our presentation after our question and answer session. I would like to stop here, and I trust that some food of thought was given. You may want to bring up some questions or any other concerns at this point pertaining to this subject. And now we will proceed with the first question, which goes like this. If I understand your presentation correctly, one of the mistakes that we can make here in the Western world is to think that fasting and general ascetic activity is something separate from the knowledge that we have as Christians. And instead of understanding them as bound together with the life of the church, here in the West, the perception is that this is merely something traditional with a small t and not necessarily connected with the life of the church. I must thank you very much for these questions because it gives us the opportunity to address some important issues. Many times we talk about the West and our mind goes to America or Europe, and we may be ignorant of the fact that the West can exist in the area of the East. It is certainly true that by East or West, we mean the way of life and not the geographical area. Western lifestyle is for someone to step down, descend, and remain in the lowest of levels of spiritual existence, to remain on the surface and to fail to enter into the depths of the heart, to be content and be satisfied from the things of the world and from the external stimuli of nature, to live only the life of the senses and be satisfied with the sensory way of life while expelling God from his life. I believe this mentality can be found in all countries in the entire world today, East or West. And it is possible for someone to be truly searching for God in the West, searching for the pure Eastern way of life, while someone in Greece, let's say, can have a very Western mentality. This Western mentality can be seen in the area of fasting and asceticism especially. For instance, when someone says that prayer is not needed, being that he can handle all his affairs on his own, when he feels that he does not need God in his life, or when he decides that there is no value in fasting, so he does not practice it, or he's not willing to be obedient to the church. This shows a Western mentality. The inability to use the proven method of the Orthodox piety and Orthodox tradition, the inability to submit, characterizes Western mentality. Fasting and prayer are indispensable in this process of man's therapy. Generally speaking, when someone does not have the ability to fast, it shows that he bases his entire existence on material things or on matter provided by nature. He wants to satisfy his passions. His mind is attached to matter and not God. His mind is attracted to the creation and not the Creator. The very same thing happens when someone does not want to pray. It clearly means that his nous is darkened. He feels that prayer is a waste of time. These attitudes are some examples that demonstrate a Western way of life or a Western mindset. And now we get to the next question, which goes like this. You mentioned something about teaching the older children, about teaching them the lives of the saints and the problems of society today, how to overcome the fears of death. Can you expand on that? Because here in America we see nihilism, Nietzscheism running rampant. And in this young culture, we see many children committing suicide and losing their way. Can you expand upon that somewhat? Death is an existential fact, and not simply something that ends our biological life. But it is a fact that we feel that we carry with us from the beginning of our existence. When we speak about death, we mean this mortality and corruption that we have within us from the day of our conception. From that very moment, we are destined to die. Disease and corruption shows the presence of death within our being. A Swiss psychologist, Gliazé, has done extensive studies in this area and has shown that a child at the age of 7 to 11 years of age realizes for the first time that death is an irreversible matter. Up to that age, a child does not have a clear knowledge about the existence of death. This is why the problems begin after these ages. What is death, and why did grandfather die, and why we have to die? And during his teenage years, these existential problems increase even more. The teenager tries to come up with answers as to what is death, what is life, why do I exist, why do my friends die, why do people die in wars, what exactly happens when the soul leaves the body, why didn't my parents ask me if I wanted to be born before they went ahead and had me? All these things need to be addressed. Now, if society in general and the education system does not offer concrete answers, the child is left at a state of confusion and imbalance. He cannot come to terms with these existential problems, and this is the reason of drug abuse, substance abuse, rebellion. Now, when the church fails to address these issues about life and death and eternity, then the problem becomes much worse. The teenager is searching to find a meaning in his life, a bigger and higher meaning than what their senses offer to them. Again, when teenagers fail to find this meaning through their families, their church, or their community, then they end up very troubled. We must deal with this precise dilemma and show the children that Christ is victorious over death, and someone must live this victory in his personal life. Christ destroyed death by death. I can overcome the passions and the death that lurks in my existence. We mentioned earlier that we should not limit our Sunday school teachings to social ethics and morality, but we should proceed to delve into ontology. The grassroots of these problems, the depth of our being. A high school teacher in Athens tells me that when he talks to the children about Orthodox psychotherapy, they become extremely enthused. This is the very thing that they are seeking and search for. And we continue now with another question. What is the role of Western psychology for the Orthodox, since psychology has a different view about the origin of man, about anthropology and psychotherapy? And can there be such a role between psychology and an Orthodox believer? It's the first part of the question. And the second part, how do we confront the new findings of medical science concerning the biochemical basis of chemical disorders? We as Orthodox try to see the depth of the problem, the ontological problem, and there's a vast difference on how Western psychology views illness and how Orthodoxy looks at this illness. In a final analysis, illness is not the lack of balance, but the lack of our relationship with God. In Orthodox theology, illness is the radical change, a change that took place after the fall, and this radical change of man's nature causes illness. We certainly agree on the existence of spiritual, psychological, and neurological problems and disorders, and when man leaves God, then he is plagued by a number of disorders. His nerves are affected along with his entire psychological state. We do have cases, however, where a man is close to God, has grace and prayer, lives spiritually, but due to bodily or physical dysfunctions, this man can be infected and in need of cure, need of a doctor. Again, a spiritual man, one who has the grace of the Holy Spirit, can distinguish when a disorder is physiological, caused by various bodily ailments, or when a problem is caused by sin and guilt, and when a problem is caused by the actions of demons. Many people that work in the area of psychiatry and psychology, in the pursuit of psychotherapy, they do not differentiate between these different causes and treat every illness alike. I remember a recent Haggerite Holy Father who slept in the Lord a few years ago saying, "This child needs to go see a saint," or "This child needs to go see a doctor." In the final analysis, a true Orthodox theologian, according to Father John Romanidis, is one who can discern clearly between negative energies that are the work of the devil, energies from the Spirit of God, and natural states of the body. The second session in this series, which is related to our previous presentation, is more practical, while the previous session was more theoretical. And this present subject will deal with the Church as a therapeutic center. The Church offers true life indeed. It transforms the